Përshëndetje të nderuar shikues të emisionit Arkivi këtu në Radio Televizionin e Kosovës. Sonte do të flasim për një klerik ortodoks fetar, por jo vetëm, ai ishte edhe kryeministri i Shqipërisë. Gjithashtu u mor edhe me letërsi dhe përkthime, ishte dramaturg e diplomat, por ishte edhe muzikant. Sonte do të flasim për Fanolin. Fanoli u lind me 6 janar të vitit 1882 në një fshat shqiptar apo fshat shqipfëlës rreth kufirit Greqi-Turqi. Fillorën dhe të mesmen e kreu në gjuhën greke, tek ai ndikoi krenaria e fshatit shqiptar për të kaluarën historike dhe dashuria për shkrimin shqip. Që nga bankat e shkollës ju shfaq karakteri pavarur dhe fryma e revoltës. Për këtë shkak nuk ju dha diploma në kohën e dur, gjë që e pengoi të emërojë mësues atë vit shkollor. Më 1903 shkoi në Egjipt, ku zuri punë si mësues i greqishtës. Ndërkohë, njihet me lëvizjen kombëtare i ndihmuar pra edhe nga patriot, nis veprimtarinë politike dhe letrare, ku shkruajti artikuj publicistik për ktheu në greqisht, Shqipëria çka qenë, ç'është dhe ç'do të bëhet të samifrashrit. Pra në Egjipt në vitin 1906, Noli shkoi nga Egjipti, pra shkoi në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës nga viti 1908 deri me 1912. Kreu studimet e larta për art në Universitetin e Harvardit. Gjatë kësaj periudhe, nxori dhe revistën e parë Shqipe Dielli, pra në vitin 1909. Dy fjalë për kryeministrin e Shqipërisë që keni këtu. Nuk është fjala të lavdohem për veten time. A ka ndonjë vend ku shumica muhamedan dhe të zgjedhë një kryeministës priv të krishter? Kjo është lavdata më e madhe që mund t'i bëhet shqiptarëve. Kur isha në Shqipëri, hipja kalit dhe shkoja fshat më fshat, dhe folja me fshatar, dhe u çudita me shkelësinë e tyre, dhe u thash që ky popull meriton çdo sakrifisë nga ne. Ky është fjalimi autentik i Fanolit i vitit 1962, të mbajtur në Boston të Amerikës, para shqiptarëve, të cilët do të keni mundësinë ta ndjeqni përmes një dokumentari. Por para se të ndjekim këtë dokumentar, do të dëshiroja miqësore mysafirët të cilët do t'i prezentoj e që i kam në studio. Profesor doktor Agim Zogaj, mirëmbrëma dhe mirëserdhët.
Përshëndetje, faleminderit.
Gjithashtu kam kënaqësinë që për herë të parë ta kem regjisorin Ramazan Ajdinin, pra regjisorin e dokumentarit për Fanoli, mirëmbrëma dhe mirëserdhët.
Kënaqësi, faleminderit.
Atëherë, siç që ju paralajmërova, por në fillim do të shohim pra këtë dokumentar të vitit 1982 të Ramazan Ajdinit, ku përveç fjalimit të Nolit do të keni rastin të ndiqni rrëfime interesante të bashkëpunëtorëve të tij në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Ta ndjekim.
On March the 13th, 1965, the Albanian community in the United States of America and Albanians throughout the world lost their most distinguished leader of the Albanian Renaissance, the well-known patriot, religious leader, poet, writer, spokesman at the League of Nations, composer, translator and philosopher, Fan Stilian Noli. Thousands of people, followers and friends, and official delegations from around the world assembled at St. George Albanian Orthodox Church, which Bishop Noli built with his own hands. They came to say goodbye for the last time, passing in silence where his body lay covered with the Albanian flag. After religious services led by priests he himself ordained, Bishop Noli was complimented by Secretary of the Archdiocese, D. Legica.
The passing away from this life of our beloved Metropolitan Fan Stilian Noli has cast a dark shadow.
His remains were taken to Forest Hill Cemetery in Boston. Fan Noli left us at the moment of deciding to return to his homeland, something he had dreamed of throughout his life, to see Albania free. As he himself once said in a poem, "For as summer follows winter, we will return sometime to the hearth and the workshop, by the banks of the Vios and the Boon." But his death made impossible his last hope. Professor Peter Prifty, a follower of Noli, made his in memoriam speech.
His life spanned 2 centuries, his activities 2 continents, his achievements 2 periods in the history of Albania. Endowed with rare gifts of mind, possessing a keen social consciousness and devoted to the ideal of Albanian nationalism and human brotherhood, he made outstanding and lasting contributions to the cause of Albanian independence, the Albanian Orthodox Church, Albanian diplomacy, history, poetry, and literature. He built our church and taught us to worship God in the language of our forefathers. With his writings in history, his translations of the classics in world literature, his poetic achievements, and his work as a clergyman and diplomat, he helped to develop in us a sense of our common background, deepened our understanding and affection for the land of our origin, made us cherish him now that he is gone, for he is still with us in spirit. He is a living part of our church and our faith. The decade of the 80s is especially important for the Albanians in the United States for two reasons. One, because in 1882 or thereabout, the first Albanian to come to the United States to settle here arrived in the United States. His name is Nicholas Christopher. The other reason why the 1980s are so important for the Albanians of America is that Noli, Bishop Stilian Noli, was born in the year 1882. Bishop Noli came to the United States a little later. He arrived here in 1906. He came from Egypt, where he had been for a while, and met there several Albanian nationalists. Jani Vruho was one of them, Spiro Dine was another, and it was on their recommendation that he came to the United States, because they said that the United States is a place where you can do the most good, where the need is greatest for someone like you to build up the national spirit and to mobilize, to organize the Albanians in the United States for the national cause, to serve the interests of Albanian nationalism at that time, which was, of course, a very, very great issue. It was something that was in the wind, in the air, something that all the Albanians were all over the world were very much interested and concerned about, because they wanted to see Albania an independent country, an independent nation, free from the domination of the Turks.
And so it happens. Fan Noli arrives in the United States of America May 10th, 1906, settling in Jamestown, New York, among the members of a patriotic society called Longing for the Motherland. Subsequently, he moves to Boston to work with Sotir Petsi, founder of the first Albanian weekly newspaper, The Nation. In 1907, he founds the Oath of Loyalty Society in Boston, and on March 8, 1908, he is ordained priest.
A young Albanian died in here, in the United States. And then, being of Orthodox, there were no Albanian Orthodox churches. But because of the politics, the Greeks refused. No church should refuse anything. The church should be separated. See, the church should not take interest on the politics. And they refused to give a bureau to this young Albanian as a Christian. So they had to take him to a Syrian church on it. Later, after the Albanians, after they began to talk and see how the Greeks acted, they felt that there was no one than Noli to be their leader, spiritual leader. They pointed out to Noli that he should be the one in here. So he was the first to establish an Orthodox Albanian church in America. And the direct result was, or the cause, from this young man that was refused to have a Christian bureau.
The day on which he conducted his first Albanian liturgy is a turning point in the history of the Albanian Renaissance. We cannot forget it, and we cannot permit others to forget it. Unquestionably, his major role as a churchman was the translation of over 44 books into Albanian and then into English, many of them liturgical books, to provide the Albanian people with the ability and the opportunity to worship in the language of their origin.
Then Noli continued, of course, with his activities in the interest of Albanian nationalism, Albanian independence in the United States, and very soon became the leader of the Albanian community in the United States. He continued with his education at Harvard University and won his Bachelor of Arts in 1912. Then, of course, he was the head of the Albanian Church, Albanian Orthodox Church in the United States, which was founded in 1908.
On April 28, 1912, Fan Noli founds the Pan-Albanian Federation of America, called VATRA, which becomes one of the most influential voices of Albanian national identity. He is to retain both an active and an honorary presidency throughout his lifetime. On November the 28th, 1912, the Albanian flag is raised for the first time in 500 years over the city of Vlora, and Albania proclaims its independence. In 1913, he is asked to speak at the Albanian Congress in Trieste, Austria, convened to open foreign blockades of Albania. He visits Albanian communities all over Europe and makes connection with the progressives trying to help Albania gain independence. On July 27, 1919, Fan Noli is appointed Bishop-elect of the Albanian Orthodox Church of America by the acclamation of his people. In 1920, he is appointed Albania's representative to the League of Nations in Geneva, Switzerland. Fan Noli is widely acclaimed as a statesman and as an articulate spokesman of the Albanian cause.
Fan Noli's principal contribution as a churchman was in his translation of the Orthodox Divine Liturgy into the Albanian language in 1908. Then surely his major achievement as a statesman were his singular efforts in gaining Albania's admission to the League of Nations on December 17, 1920. The Manchester Guardian, one of the prestigious newspapers of England, in its editorial shortly after this, made the following tribute to him. Fan Noli is a man who would have been remarkable in any country. An accomplished diplomat, an expert in international politics, a skillful debater. From the outset, he made a deep impression in Geneva. He is a man of vast culture who has read everything worth reading in English and French. Thus, Noli himself would say that his efforts in gaining Albania's admission to the League of Nations in 1920 were his major contribution to the Albanian nation. For the first time in 5 centuries, Albania's borders were recognized, one of the principal areas of contention in the Balkan area.
1924, following a revolution in Albania, Fan Noli's dream is realized. On June 17th, by popular vote, he is elected Prime Minister of Albania and forms a new cabinet. As active regent, he attempts agrarian reforms and institutes democratic policies.
Why the revolution of Noli fell in 1924?
Well, I do think it fell because he did not, he took in his government most of the reactionary behavior
Right.
Agalar, and he did not proceed in the proper way. And naturally, he did fail because his progressive ideas they did were considered proper for those
Fine.
for those
Right,
times,
right.
and the one that he had among them. Like, let's say, he had Capezelli, that he was the army of the revolution.
Right.
He was nobody. Then Bushati from Shkodra, he come. And those people, they were mostly reactionary. They were not the progressive ideas and democracy
Right.
like Noli.
They were thinking more.
And then he has to fail. He had to fail. And he did not took drastic measures
Right.
to be in power. And
He
probably
was kind of soft-hearted, I guess.
Yeah,
He didn't
yeah.
want too much bloodshot in between.
not only that, but he let class in power to do whatever. He promised reform agrar and those and that, but he did not do it.
Yeah.
And another thing, he recognized Russia at that time.
It was
And,
the first recognized Russia.
yeah, Albania recognized Russia, and naturally the allies, England,
Right,
United
right.
States, France,
They refused to give a help.
they did not give him help.
Later, his government is overthrown by his opposer, King Zog. Noli fled the country never to return. He left, but his ideas of democracy and freedom remained among the majority of the Albanians. From 1924 till 1932, he's mostly residing in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland, promoting the Albanian literary renaissance. Eventually, he returned to America, where he devoted the rest of his life to church work and literature, as primate of the Albanian Orthodox Church in America and spiritual leader of the Albanian communities. Once, a writer asked Noli whether he thought his name would live on in Albanian history. He replied, "If my name lives on, it will be in Albanian literary annals." From 1925 to 1965, he wrote histories, biographies, and poetry, and made translations into Albanian from the classics, ranging from Omar Khayyam to Don Quixote, and from Shakespeare to Ibsen. He Americanized the Albanian church by translating all the required books of ritual into English to meet the needs of the younger generation.
Literature, Noli is recognized as the first great modern man in the field in Albanian literature. He is the first one who translated the great classics. The translation of by Noli of Cervantes' work, the Don Quixote, in 5 volumes, is remarkable not only for the language in which he has rendered it, I mean the style and the accuracy, but also because of the criticism or the interpretation that he makes of the work in the introduction of the translation. He says that this was very, very timely, very applicable to Albania and to the Albanian people because of the conditions which he saw as more or less comparable. I mean, the social and the economic conditions of Spain at the time that Cervantes wrote, and the conditions in Albania in Noli's time, the time that he did the translation. He says that the common people were, well, they were oppressed, they were suffering because of the unjust economic, political system in Spain at the time, and the same condition exists in Albania. And he says that it's a work that makes us laugh, but also because of the seriousness, it's a work that makes us cry. He says that let us hope that we will laugh much more in the future than in the past, because we have tried enough as a people.
Though not a native of Albania, Noli ranks foremost among the makers of modern Albania. Fan Noli's poetry and writings had a great influence on the upcoming generations of Albania from the beginning of this century until today.
We were pleased to discover two hitherto lost manuscripts, one of the Albanian Rhapsody and the second of a Byzantine overture, which was composed by Fanoli as part of his music bachelor's degree at the Boston Conservatory of Music. But Noli simply didn't write music for symphonic orchestras. He was interested in the common person. He was himself of peasant stock and always loved the village people. His translations of the choral music of the Orthodox Church, first into Albanian and even later into English, are testimony to this. He loved directing the choir. He loved to have young voices, to teach them how to breathe, what the diaphragm was in the body, how to project, and many people who became actively involved in the choirs and in their later professions owe their debt of gratitude to Metropolitan Theophan Noli.
He also, to keep us youth together, translated the liturgy into English. And not only that, he had his priests, even though they spoke broken English, do part of the liturgy in English. He was a hard taskmaster. When he wanted something done, you had to do it. But he was the type of chap that when you did it, he gave a reward. And how do you give a reward? By just saying thank you, and that's all you needed from him. Because of him, we have this beautiful music. And I myself get so touched with it that I'm singing in the choir. This is what he's given us.
Theophan Noli left his entire collection of manuscripts, books, tape recordings to the Archdiocese. I think this was very important in his case because he wanted his collection not to be part of a museum, something only for research, but something connected with a living institution such as the church, which he helped to establish. He wanted students, youngsters, elders, scholars, all to use his volumes, many of which are here. This is only a tip of the iceberg. We have over 10,000 letters, correspondence from his collection. We have about 5,000 volumes, many of them rare. Here, for example, we have some of his own works, which he himself translated and wrote, this shelf here. We also have books in English concerning Albanology, Albanian culture and what have you. Albanian history is here in the next section. Albanian literature, the Orthodox Church, ecclesiastical literature, Albanian language volumes. We have some of the rare books that are unavailable even at some of the major American universities. And of course, Albanian liturgical books of all the faith, the Orthodox faith, Roman Catholic, the Muslim, and what have you. So we're very proud of this library as being a working library connected with a living institution, not simply one which is reserved for scholars or for an elite. We're interested in the library serving the people which Metropolitan Theophan Noli himself served. At the same time, some of the features here might interest us. For example, this piano was one at which he did many of his compositions, his translations of Orthodox liturgical music, and this was, as you know, music was so much a part of his career. His choir, 3 years ago in 1978, when we celebrated the 70th anniversary of the Albanian Orthodox Church, in his honor published Mesha Shkip, containing the liturgical hymns of Holy Week and Easter, and some original hymns of the Orthodox Church, which Metropolitan Noli himself composed. At the same time, we have one of his bookcases with volumes in many of the languages he knew: German, Greek, Arabic, in addition, of course, to Albanian and English, Slavonic, Russian, and we know in his last years he was learning Aramaic, and on the day of his death, on his desk in Florida, at the home which the Albanian people provided for him, we found a manuscript of Genesis. He began translating the Old Testament now into English, modern English, from the original Hebraic and Aramaic sources. This is the type of man he was. Many people tried to say Fanoli was only an Albanian patriot. and he used the church and all the institutions for Albanian patriotism. Others suggest that he was really a scholar who only desired to do research, and research to field which was up until this time yet unexplored, namely the field, various aspects of Albanian studies. At the same time, it's my impression, I knew him as a child, as a teenager, sitting at his feet when he visited my parents' home. In my impression, Noli was truly a Renaissance man. He was at ease in all these fields. He never used one to taint the other. He was an extremely objective man. Although he was a patriot in the Albanian sense, he also was very much the scholar and could keep the various compartments of his life in their proper perspective. And this is why I for one, admire Noli and await the centenary of his birth in 1982.
He was our religious leader as Albanian Orthodox, but more than that, he was our mentor in morality and in ethics of our lives. And he was more of a teacher and our mentor to imbue in us the history of Albania and the movements of the Albanian movement in order to establish a state of Albania. When I'm speaking of 1920, in that period in time, you know, there was great conflict in Albania. And he taught us how we should put every ounce of strength we had. And incidentally, at one period in time, about $175,000 was raised in the United States. And people like my father were earning $6 and $7 a week, and they pledged their month's salary for the movement. That's how charismatic he was, and that's how dynamic he was to get these people to feel. And incidentally, you know, he never lived in Albania till he went to Albania, and it was an amazing thing with him, that he was imbued so deeply with it. He often spoke of Albania and the Albanian people, and whenever he spoke, honestly, and I have goose pimples in my body now, I feel, because whenever he spoke about their trials and tribulations and these village people who not educated, some of them probably illiterate, he had tears in his eyes just thinking of them. How his feelings were for him, because he had when he ran and became Prime Minister of Albania, he fashioned it to the type of elections that we have in a democracy here. So he has these whistle stop, and he saw all of Albania, and an Albania which he was not familiar with, only was familiar because it stemmed from his heart, so that same kind of tradition transpired here in the United States with us.
Du fjalë për kryeministrin e Shqipërisë, ish kryeministrin e Shqipërisë që keni këtu. S'është fjala që të luftohem për veten time. Po dua t'ju them këtë gjë. A ka shumë kombe në të cilat shumica të jenë muhamedanë edhe të zgjedhin një kryeministër prift të krishterë. Kjo më duket është luftata më e madhe që mund të bëjmë shqiptarëve. Edhe këtë e thom jo vetëm këti që të bëjmë një luftatë të zbrazur, po kur të herë që kam patur rastin kur isha në Shqipëri, kam hipur kalit e kam qetitur fshat në fshat dhe kam folur me fshatarët, me shqiptarët, dhe me të vërtet u çudita për shpejtësinë e tyre. Edhe aherë tash me të vërtet ky popull meriton çdo sakrificë që të fitojë një liri. Shumë thonë se shqiptarët s'kanë patur patriotizëm. Gjë më e gabuar se kjo s'ka. Ç'kishim në program të bëni? Kishim në program të bëjmë një Shqipëri independente, e bëmë, nuk mund të presim, më këtoni nga foshnja që t'i ketë të gjitha mirësit. Foshnja duhet t'i jepet kohë, të rritet dhe të tregojë se ç'është. S'mund t'i qërtosh prindrit edhe thuash ç'kini bërë me këtë foshnjë këtu. Duhet të presë që sa të rritet foshnjë e të tregojë se
So we went to Noli, and he asked, he told him just what I said about how the people of Albania wanted to meet him so badly, and some of the high officials had told him to come, to ask Fanoli to come to Albania, so the people could see Fanoli. They wanted to meet him. So he said, well, you know, those days, it was a little, right after the McCarthy era, this and that, and he said maybe politically it doesn't look so good. And he was making excuses not to go, and also his health was not that good, you know, he was getting old. And it was about 5-6 years before he died, and he had been having trouble, see? So he wasn't a strong man. Fanoli was never, all through his life, he was a sort of anemic man. He was never he wasn't a big eater. For a long time, he was a vegetarian. I know this for a fact, see? He didn't eat anything but vegetables for about 25, 30 years.
Of course, he had a tremendous sense of humor. Probably one of the best orators I've ever heard, whether it was Albanian or any other nationality. He captivated an audience, and his humor was dry, and he told stories that were just, I can't tell some of them because he would be the one to tell them. For instance, he told a story one time about about priests, you know. He said there was once a priest who would go to a wedding or a christening, and they'd ask him to take a drink, and he took a drink, but he couldn't say no to him, so he kept drinking, and then he got, in Albanian we say uberdru, but in English I think you say you got stoned, you know, and the donkey would take him home, but one day the donkey wanted to drink some water, and he took him in a parua, in a brook, to drink a little water. And the donkey drank, and then the priest said to the donkey, drink a little more, and the donkey went this way. He says, drink a little more, and the donkey went this way. And finally the priest says, you should have been the priest. He says, not me. No, he could get away with a story like that.
Distinguished guests on the head table, ladies and gentlemen, when Nasreddin Hoxha was a young man, he saw a dream. One day he wanted his father to explain it to him, what was the meaning of that dream. His father said, yes, I'll be glad to explain your dream if you tell me what it was. Well, he said, I dreamt of ice cream, lots of ice cream. Well, his father said, I can explain you your dream, I can interpret your dream, if you give me $1. Well, retorted Nasreddin Hoxha, if I had $1, I would not be dreaming of ice cream, I would be eating it.
You know, Fanoli had a good temper. Oh, yeah? He had really an Albanian, what we call Albanian temper.
Oh, yes.
But he knew how to control his temper.
Right, that's right.
You know, he really, you know, most of us, we discuss and we lose our temper and, you know, all of a sudden we start shouting at each other, you know. Not him, he knew how to control, but you could see that he was, many times he would boil under his, but he knew how to control his temper. And yet, when he started to talk about it, his tone was even, and yet his words were so sharp, you could tell that he was really troubled about what was going on.
Right.
But he never showed his temper. You know,
He never raised his voice.
Well, never raised his voice.
Naturally, he was a clergyman, and how was he as a clergyman? Was he religion? Of course, there's a matter of degrees in religion. Was he a clergyman in the sense of a fanatic, that only his persuasion was the only proper one? No, he was not that. He was the man of the world. And was he, did he think, well, for a great number of years, our clergymen wear a collar that's not a tie, you know, it's back collar. And for a number of years, he wore a shirt and tie, you know, as a clergyman.
He became a religious man in order to help the Albanians become Albanians, because most of them those days, they were, some considered themselves Greek, some Turks.
Was he a happy person?
No, I don't think he was a very happy man. No, I don't think so. He was concerned. His concerns were deep in humanity. He worried about our people, and he he wasn't hesitant in voicing his opinion on extremely controversial subjects, you know. He went out forward in some sense. If these hippies of the 60s, they thought they were lifting the conscience of people, they should have met Noli. He lifted it way up beyond any of they could lift it up. And so a person like that, you know, is just can't be happy because he's concerned for things. You know. I remember when he got his PhD from Boston University, and he wrote, I think the thesis was Beethoven and the Revolution, and we gave him a little party, and a group of us gathered together and gave a party in my restaurant. I didn't have this restaurant then, at one of my other restaurants, and he just opened up, and because he just wouldn't open up to everyone. It was a small gathering. I think we were about 20 of us, you know. And he just opened up about things, you know, in general, about the whole, the world and the Albania.
When he died, we lost a great man that will never be replaced. But we had to go. We had to go and keep what Fanoni left us. We had to keep the churches. We had to keep the organization. We had to keep the newspapers. And everything else what Fanoli worked for. The young people to keep the language and traditions of Albania. All these 40 years, which now we're celebrating, Free Albania organization in Liria has been mostly active in America, and is the only Albanian American newspaper who was printed weekly without interpretation time. The Liria prints historical articles, national articles, news from Albania, and news from Albanian colonies. Every year we have a picnic, and we gather up about 2,000 to 3,000 people, and every year on 28 November we celebrate the Albanian Independence Day, and also we have 6,000 to 1,000 people every year. We're going to continue with this program because we figure that Albanian colony is needed for the Free Albania organization and weekly newspaper.
Have a moment of silence for our many Albanian courageous leaders and our relatives and friends who are deceased. I përjeqim kujtimin.
Noli, as everybody knows, was a great man, and we all have a respect for him before his death and after.
He was a great scholar. He was a translator. He was also a great patriot and a great politician. He dedicated his life to the Albanian.
But from those who were impartial, we might find comments such as this from George Bernard Shaw, the author-critic, who wrote only 6 complimentary letters in his life. And he wrote to Noli, and he said of his work, Beethoven and the French Revolution, "It is the work of a first-rate critic and biographer. I read it through from end to end with the utmost satisfaction, being myself a connoisseur as musician, critic, and artist, philosopher by profession."
For my part, Noli, he was A1 in my book.
Because of Finest Noli, Bishop Finest Noli, we have a community here. Without the church, there'd be no Lydia, no Vatra, there'd be nothing.
He just had such a wonderful feeling about things of that. He was a humanitarian of the first before he was anything else.
Actually, he was in favor of Albania Socialist Republic.
He was telling us so many times, that's the way to do, boys. You've got to have gathering together, strong organization.
Yes. And he was capable of handling the language and the people, and he knew about theology, because he was a very well-educated man.
He was such a giant, such a big tree, but we were right under him, you know, as a tree. We could not see him because he covered us all.
He was a good shepherd, respected, admired, obeyed. We cherished him when he lived, and we cherish him now that he's gone.
Të nderuar shikues, jemi rikthyer kështu pasi pam pra një dokumentar të realizuar në vitin 1982 nga regjisori Ramazan Ajdini. Si ishte të realizoje këtë dokumentar në atë kohë dhe si u realizua në bashkëpunim me televizionin e Prishtinës apo si u realizua këtë dokumentar?
Në fakt, fillimisht doshte të realizohet bashkëpunim me televizionin e Prishtinës, mirë po për shkak të demonstratave të atë njëshit u anullua projekti nga Prishtina. Edhe ndërmjetësuesi ishte në fakt Maksut Sheu, që ishte korespondent i rilindjes në New York në atë kohë. Edhe Maksuti më njoftoi, tha ata s'munen me ardhë, e atëherë vendosa që ta vazhdoj projektin vetë, me vetë financin të jemin personal, edhe e vazhdova, dhe me thonë...
Tashmë kanë betur një histori, këtu pam shumë bashkëpunëtor të tij të cilët kanë punuar me Nolin. Ishte vështirë të gjeje?
Po, unë fillimisht i bona disa kërkime, edhe është interesant se bashkë kur shkohen me bërë kërkimet, atje e takova dhe Ukshin Hotin, i cili ishte në Chicago, ku jetonje unë, edhe tani shkoj në Howard, vazhdoj studimet atje, për doktoraturën kur ishte, edhe deta 2 javë ditë marra shënimet, i bona kontaktet e para me gjithë, fillimisht nga kisha, ku prifti, do të thënë, Ad Leolini, tani mi dha gjitha bashkëpunëtorët që ishin të vjetër, disa që janë ritmete, do nxënës të tina, edhe njëndër të nxënësit e tina është Ad Leolini, i cili e ka majtë kishën shqiptare të Bostonit gati 40 vitet e fundit, edhe një intelektual jashtëzakonisht i fortë, edhe kontribus i madh i çështjes shqiptare, lidhjeve me Shqipërinë, me Kosovën, edhe lidhjet ka bërë...
Me admirim flitnin të gjithë për Nolin?
Jashtëzakonisht admirim të jashtëzakonshëm. Ka qenë një njeri i madh, si që thot anjeni, a ishte një gjigant i madh. Kur ishte gjallë na së ne shifin se a i rrinte mbi ne, se në gjdo lami, edhe nuk është e rastit që u bo prift. Noli bëhet prift për shkak të nevojave të me një hershme lind një problem. Një shqiptar vdes në Boston, shkojnë të kisha greke, ato refuzojnë të varrosin të flitet në gjuhën shqipe aty, apo të avejnë flamurin shqiptar. Edhe prej aty i bezmatojnë grekët, shkojnë të një kish armeniane, armenet. Edhe armenet me bojnë varrimin aty, edhe aty lind biseda dhe nevoja. Edhe gjitha i propozojnë, Nolit thot, hajtë të bojmë ty prift, si je intelektual e përvetëson lamin. Edhe ja fillon punët me njëherë.
Do të kthehemi prapë. Por para se të bëj prift në SBA, Noli kishte një veprimtari bukur të ngjeshur, si kombëtare, si politike, si adhetare, por jo vetëm, edhe në letërsia i shquhej. Si mund ta përmbledhim personalitetin e Fanolit në përgjithësi, gjatë historisë?
Milja, fillimisht them se komuniteti shqiptar në Amerikë, i cili fillon prej vitit 1884 me shqiptarin e parë Kol Kristoferin, i cili arri në Amerikë, është prej fshatit Katun, afër Korçës, ashtu thirret, po. Është një prej epokave më të ndritshme, pra kontributi i komunitetit shqiptar në historinë tonë kombëtare. Dhe në këtë kontekst duhet pas parasysh një plejad të tërë, e cila fillon me Sotir Pecin, Fanolin, Mehmet Konisën, Fajk Konisën, në rrafshin publicistik, në rrafshin e gazetarisë, në rrafshin e mendimit politik shqiptar, në rrafshin e afirmimit të adhetarisë shqiptare dhe të afirmimit të çështjes shqiptare në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës. Ne lirisht mund të themi se ky kontribut ishte i jashtëzakonshëm edhe në shpalljen e pavarësisë së Shqipërisë. Pastaj në antarësimin e Shqipërisë në lidhjen e kombeve. Pastaj
në merite Nolit?
Patjetër, do e mos, patjetër. Noli edhe përfaqëson në një periudhë caktuar, caktuar ka pas ide dhe pikpamje që të formohet madje edhe një qeveri në mërgim në udhëheqjen e komunitetit shqiptar dhe gjithë këtyre prizëve mendimtarëve të cilët ka qenë Noli. Noli është pjesë e gazetës së parë e cila del për kombi, me një kontribut jashtëzakonshëm në afirmimin e mendimit politik dhe çështjes shqiptare. Noli pastaj vazhdon me gazetën Dielli, nëse në themelus, po ndër të tjera kontributi adhetar i Nolit është me Vatrën, sepse Vatra shndrohet në dijepin e mendimit politik adhetar të shqiptarëve në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës në rrethonat jashtëzakonisht të vështira dhe të rënda në kohë edhe në hapësirë. Noli jep kontribut të rëndësishëm në përpjekjen për njohjen e pavarësisë së Shqipërisë, pastaj për njohjen ndërkombëtare të Shqipërisë pas luftës së dytë botërore. Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, madje gjatë luftës së dytë botërore, i bën një kërkesë Nolit për shkak të autoritetit që ka pas, jo vetëm të bashkëadhetarët në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, por përgjithsisht të kombi shqiptar në ato rrethona historike, që ta jep një deklaratë pra gjatë luftës së dytë botërore dhe t'i drejtohet popullit shqiptar në Shqipëri që të merr pjesë në aleancën e madhe të koalicionit botëror antifashist. Dhe ai e jep një deklaratë përmes zërit e Amerikës, një paraqitje brillante e shkëlqyeshme, në cilën i bën thirrje popullit shqiptar, gjithandej që tjetë pjesë e atij koalicionit për të luftuar nazifashizmin dhe për të fituar të drejtat në një qytetërim të ri.
Të kthejmë edhe pak sa më herët.
Pastaj, po.
Të kthejmë edhe pak sa më herët ku ishte emëruar si kryeministër për 6 muaj, ishte i kryeministër i Shqipërisë në atë kohë.
Noli edhe me propozimin e Vatrës vjen antari propozohet për në parlamentin shqiptar.
Po, e vërtet, edhe ajo.
Kjo është një ngjarje e jashtëzakonshme.
Por çfarë ndodhi pastaj në revolucionin e qershorit?
Revolucioni i qershorit nuk pas sukses, do thëtë. Në histori ka shumë arsye, jo të kundërshtimit që erdhve prej beglerëve dhe prej Zogut, por edhe për faktin se vetë qeveria Zogut nuk ishte arritur me kabinetin e tij që ta formësonte një program i cili do të krijonte një stabilitet përgjithshëm politik, ekonomik, social, kulturor në Shqipëri. E vetmja pikë, sipas referencave të historiografisë shqiptare, në programin e qeverisë të Nolit, e cila ishte e suksesshme, ishte pozicioni anti-Zogut. Por kjo nuk ishte mjaftuar. Pas revolucionit qershorit, madje Zogu e dënon edhe me vdekje, domethënë Fanolin, sepse kishin divergjenca të fuqishme politike rreth ndërtimit, rreth krijimit të Shqipërisë, edhe në këtë kontekst këto antagonizma midis Nolit dhe Zogut pastaj edhe vazhdojnë në një periudhë të caktuar. Por ato kanë premisa, lirisht mund ta themi tash, post festum, pas 100 e so vjet, do thotë këtyre periudhave, kanë premisa edhe në konceptin politik, për të mos thënë edhe ideologjik dhe reformator të shtetit shqiptar. Zogu megjithatë e kishte një orientim thelbësisht pro-perëndimor, natyra thona, ndërsa Noli dhe i thartë e politikës Nolit dhe programit, jo vetëm qeverisë të revolucionit qershorit, programit të qeverisë të Nolit, megjithatë kishin nuancat saktuara të ideve të majta.
Po pse ndodhi kjo? Ai një kohë të gjatë jetoi në Amerikë. Dhe Amerika bën se një si...
Kjo është një prej çështjeve në cilën historiografia shqiptare nuk ka bërë hulumtime, nuk ka bërë studime. Dhe edhe ne sot përmes këtij emisionit tuaj shumë të respektuar të Radio Televizionit të Kosovës, i bëjmë thirrje studiosëve që të bëjnë përpjekje të japin një zbërthim teorik, politik, ideor, kombëtar, si ndodhi kjo që do thotë Noli, i cili jetoi, u rrit dhe u zhvillua dhe intelektualisht dhe me një botë jashtëzakonisht zhvilluar të kulturës së tij në Amerikë, të ishte megjithatë në ndikimin, në ndikimin edhe ideve të majta.
Mos erdhi kjo nga fryma e vendit ku lindi, sepse në Greqi, në atë kohë, Greqia shuhej që ishte pak më e majtë.
Nuk mendoj që është ajo dominante, por zhvillimet rrethona që në atë kohë në Evropë, përgjithsisht fillon lindja e ideve të majta dhe fuqizimi i ideve të majta. Noli është edhe antar i Konarës, domethënë, me seli në Vjenë, një organizmit politik, i cili kryesisht ka qenë, domethënë, i majtë. Noli merr pjesë në shënimin e 10 vjetorit të revolucionit tetorit, me 1927 e gjejmë në Moskë.
Madje dhe ishte emëruar nga Peshkopi rus si udhëheqës i kishës ortodokse. Ishte ashtu?
Po, mirë po, ne duhet ta shohim Nolin në kontekstin e kontributit kombëtar. Përveç, domethënë, fushën e letërsisë edhe të kulturës, ku ka qenë një shkelqim i jashtëzakonshëm. Edhe bota kulturore, perëndimore, veçmas amerikane, ka qenë jashtëzakonisht e frymëzuar me pikpamjet, me konceptet, fushën e artit, kulturës, cilat i ka shpërfaq Noli. Noli domethënë ka qenë një personalitet me një kulturë, me një formësim kulturor multidisciplinar. Po. Por ne, do të thotë historiografia shqiptare duhet të bëjë studimet më tejme, të shtëruara për ta trajtu, për ta ulëmtu mendimin politik kombëtar të Nolit. Dhe mendimi politik kombëtar i Nolit është i jashtëzakonshëm, është me ndikim jashtëzakonisht fuqishëm. Noli e thot vetë në shënimin e 50 vjetorit të Vatrës. E thot, ndoshta madje, po të mos ishte Vatra nëse do të kishte Shqipëri të pavarur ose jo. Për çka do thot vërtet duhet analizu këto pikpamje. Dhe në këtë kontekst, unë si studius, unë e shoh kontributin e komunitetit shqiptar në gjitha ato periudha prej vitit 4, 3, 5, 6, dhe deri në përfundim të luftës dytë botërore. Unë e shoh si një rilindje të vogël shqiptare. Dhe në fakt, Noli edhe bashkoanikët e tij janë frymzuar nga rilindja e jonë kombëtare. Dhe ata do thotë e vazhdojnë traditën në rilindjes kombëtare. Dhe fati i shqiptarisë do thotë edhe i kombit tonë është që ajo rilindje e vogël kombëtare djepin e saj e formson pikërisht në Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës.
Kjo na ndihmoi shumë, ndoshta edhe në aspektin e lobimit,
të cilat
e
pastaj
formësimit shteteve shqiptare, Shqipërisë fillimisht,
të cilat do të thonë e cila Amerikë, e cila demokraci do të thotë amerikane, të cilat principe, parime dhe doktrina e politikës jashtme amerikane për qytetrimin e sotëm bashkëkohor ishte në favor të shpalljes pavarësisë të shtetit të Kosovës edhe slirimit të Kosovës bashkë me luftën e shtetit ushtrisë shqiptare të Kosovës. Sepse ushtria shqiptare e Kosovës, ju lutem, e bëj tash një paralel historik, ushtria shqiptare e Kosovës ka arritë që të krijoj aleancën ushtarake dhe aleancën diplomatike me Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës dhe me NATO. Dhe kjo është një arritje kolosale e popullit shqiptar në fund shekullin e kaluar. Dhe kjo është vazhdimsi, pra, e këtyre relatave dhe bashkëpunimit të kombit shqiptar me popullin amerikan, me Shtetet e Bashkuara të Amerikës, me qeveritë amerikane, që rrjedh nga konteksti i historisë të kontributit edhe të Fanolit, Konicës, Soterpecit dhe shumë intelektualve, mendimtarve të tjerë të kohës.
Zotë Ajdini, gjatë realizimit ju keni intervistuar shumë bashkëpunëtorë të tij. Cilat ishin veçoritë e Nolit sipas atyre gjetjeve që u bët? Çka thonin për të tjetër?
Ato kishin një respekt edhe jashtëzakonshëm për Nolin, edhe nuk e mshefin influencën që Noli ka pas mbi gjithë komunitetin shqiptar, edhe në Boston.
Ju jetoni ende në Amerikë?
Po, ende.
Sa përmendet Noli tashmë atje?
Po, natyrisht përmendet, kisha e man për çdo vit, se unë jam kontakt me priftin, Leolinin i kemi majtë kontaktet, mban për vjetorin e Nolit e mbajnë, e në emni atit nuk harrohet në Amerikë asnjëherë.
Zotë Zogaj, fare në fund, sepse jemi fare në fund të emision, nuk na premton se ishte dokumentari bukur i gjatë. Ajo që ka më interesant të di, kanë bërë një hulumtim studiusit sa i përkes veprës së tij dhe në letërsi Noli shuhet që ishte mjaft i fuqishëm. Madje gjatë revolucionit të qershorit ai kishte shkruar disa poezi të cilat janë ikonë të letërsisë në shqipe, siç është për shembull Çyzhyn vdekur, është Shpellë Dragobis, Himni i Flamurit e të tjera. Dhe si mund të cilësohet edhe si shkrimtar, sepse i kishte disa epiteta, ishte prift, ishte muzikant, ishte gjithë shka, do thot, i shkonin për dore të gjitha këto, por si letrar, e kishte fuqinë e tij në letër.
Është vështirë të përcaktohet se në cilin rrafsh Noli është më i madh dhe më i madh në fushën e historisë tonë shqiptare. Por unë i veçoj, do thot, historinë politike, mendimin politik shqiptar, për cilën dha kontribut jashtëzakonshëm, me ide të jashtëzakonisht avancume përparentare dhe pro atë dheut, pro shqiptarisë, dhe në fushën e letërësisë edhe të krijimtarisë, për çka ushqu do thot si një krijues i shkëlqyshëm me veprat e tij. Dhe kontributi i tij në fushën e letërësisë tonë kombëtare është i jashtëzakonshëm dhe mendimi jo vetëm historiografisë shqiptare, por edhe kritika letrare shqiptare e radhit në rrafshin e rilindasve tonë shqiptarë.
Zotja Ajdini, ju vazhduat lobimin dhe kjo është interesant sa për fund, ishte edhe vetë pjesë e lobit. Ishte një farë inspirimi i saj përket asaj që e prodhove vetë Nolin duke parë, u inspiruat që më vonë të vazhdoni me lobim, edhe viteve të 10-90-ta?
Një ndër arsimtarët e parë të komunitetit shqiptar në Amerikë që na ka hap rrugën edhe na ka tregu se si me lobu.
Për vendin tuaj.
Për vendin e jonë.
Jemi në rrugë të mirë ende të mbajmë këtë lobim apo kemi lëshuar fare?
Mas luftës fatkeqësisht lobimi
të organizuar.
Kara është ende, unë jam ende në kryesin e lidhës shqiptare qytetarit në krye me Gjodi Eguardin dhe shoqen e tij Shirley Diaguardi, mirë po lobimi bët me financim, edhe financimit, dhe më thonë, antarësia Kara totalisht, dhe më thonë, gjatë luftës Kosovës kemi pas në Amerikë,
na duhet ende lobimi, për ta forcuar...
Edhe për gjithë botës njerëzit kanë dhënë kontribut, se di një çka kemi punu.
Por ende na duhet lobimi.
Lobimi duhet gjithmonë
këtë lidhje me Amerikën, natyrisht.
Gjithmonë do na duhet.
Jemi në fund të emisionit, ju falenderoj shumë që ishte mysafirët e mi në emisionin e Arkivi, sepse kjo ishte koha para parë dhe natyrisht që edhe dokumentari në tërësi ishte pak më i gjatë për na lënë një pjesë të diskutimit më të shkurtër. Faleminderit zoti Zogaj shumë që ishte mysafir Arkiv, faleminderit zoti Ajdini që erdhët nga Amerika për na respektuar këtu në emisionin e Arkivit. Atë të nderuar shikues, kemi ardhur kështu në fund të emisionit të Arkivit për sonte. Mos harroni emisionin e Arkivit do të mund ta ndiqni në faqet tona në Facebook dhe Instagram Arkivi.tk. Faleminderit që na ndoqët dhe miru pafshim javën tjetër.
Thank you.